Comic Book Savant, episode 373. Welcome back to the Comic Book Savant podcast. I'm your host, James Harris. This week's episode, we're going to be doing the second part of a 5-part series where I count down my 50 favorite or greatest comic book movies of all time. But before I get into that, as always, I'd like to give a shout out to my friends over at the Comics Podcast Network. You can find them over at comicspodcast.com. If you happen to like what I do here on Comic Book Savant, you want to find more comic book related podcast listening or watching material, it's a one-stop shop for you to go where it's just one page. It's a collaboration of multiple different content creators that focus on comic book related content. We just come together. We post all our episodes there for fans to find them and experiment. If you're looking to find more of what you already like with one particular show, it gives you just like I said, one easy place to go to find and experiment with finding more content. You have podcasters there that are a single person podcast like myself. You have ensemble roundtable discussion podcasts. You have ones focused on specific publishers or specific characters or even teams. So you have a lot of variety to choose from. So if you have a moment and you haven't already checked out the Comics Podcast Network, take a moment to stop by. Again, it's comicspodcast.com. There are literally hundreds of different podcasts listed there. So take a moment, stop by, and check it out. And last but not least, before I get into the episode, I'd like to give a shout out to the sponsor for the episode, which is InStockTrades.com. One of the best places you can go online when you're looking for collected editions, omnibus, Marvel Masterworks, absolute editions, anything that's a collected edition in the world of comic books or trade paperback, you can pretty much find with ease through InStockTrades.com. They have discounts ranging from 35, 42, all the way up to 50% off. On their homepage on the website of InStockTrades.com, they update it weekly. It's deals of the week that you get 50% off, and you have a different number of selections of books. And again, they rotate them out weekly, so you keep checking because you might find something you've been waiting on that you can get it even cheaper than what you normally would through the site or maybe even through somewhere else. If you're a U.S. customer and you place an order of $50 or more, you get free shipping within the U.S., which is a great little bonus to add on top from using their service. If you happen to be outside of the U.S., don't fret if you listen to this. I know I have listeners all over the world. If you still want to take part of the savings, you can. And they have some of the cheapest and most competitive international shipping rates around. So you can still don't feel like that discounts you from saving any more money because you still can save a bunch. So don't let that deter you from checking out the site and seeing what deals they have to offer. Now, with all that being said, let's jump into the episode. Now, we did part 1 a few episodes back, and I counted down from 50 to 41. So we're picking up here. And number 40 on my list of greatest comic book movies of all time would be The Wolverine. It came out back in 2013, Hugh Jackman, and this movie I really enjoyed. We got a darker Wolverine than we got from the previous movies, or we got with Wolverine, X-Men Origins Wolverine, which, I don't hate that movie as much as everyone else. The ending, of course, is horrible, but it was parts of that movie that I thought they did some really cool things, and then it was other parts of that movie that was horrible. But this was the first collaboration between Hugh Jackman and James Mangold, and it wasn't necessarily a bad movie. It kind of suffered the same fate as X-Men Origins Wolverine did, that the ending didn't quite stick. But this was overall a stronger movie than that movie was, for sure. I really dug the story, seeing him going over into Japan, because, you know, the roots of Wolverine's origins, especially in the 80s when I was growing up, was steeped so much in Japan, and Mandapur. So it gave me that vibe that I missed in those comics when Wolverine was really gaining popularity in the mid and late 80s in the comics. So it was really cool to see that captured, and I really dug the supporting cast as well. So this movie made it at number 40 for me. Number 39 is The Crow. This came out in 1994. This was Brandon Lee. This was an independent comic, a lesser known at the time independent comic. I think it was created by James O'Barr, if I remember correctly. And Brandon Lee unfortunately lost his life filming this movie towards the end. It was a stunt accident with a shooting of a gun and the slug, and he unfortunately lost his life. This movie still holds up, even though it came out way in 1994. I was a huge Brandon Lee fan, and he had done, and this is Bruce Lee's son, for those of you that are not aware. He was just kind of starting to make his mark as an action movie star, kind of being the new age version of his father. He was very charismatic, and he had done some small roles. He had done, I want to say, 2 to 3 movies up until this point, and this was really supposed to be his breakout role that was really going to catapult his career. And once you kind of see his performance in the movie, you knew it to be true. The movie went on to do extremely well. It spawned sequels done by different actors, as well as a television series that went on for quite a while. But this movie, it wasn't a super blockbuster at the time. But again, this is way back in 1984. This is, even 4 years before Blade and X-Men and the real big thing came out. But it was, for a comic book movie at the time, it was pretty successful. It was a lot of and it got even more press because of the passing of Brandon Lee. So it did fairly well in the movie theater. The franchise never was able to kind of reach the heights that it had with this release of the movie. I want to say they did maybe 3 or 4 sequels. Each one had a different actor reprising the Crow role. Trying to see. They're doing a reboot of The Crow the production has been very turbulent over they've been trying to reboot this franchise for at least the past 5+ years. I want to say last time I remembered, it's going to be Jason Momoa playing the new Crow. I don't know if it's going to be the Eric Draven Crow, because it's different people that in the comics, it was different people that were the Crow at different points in time. But I think they're going to do it. This is a total reboot, starting with the original Crow of Eric Draven. I think, I'm not 100% sure, but I do know that Momoa is attached to play the Crow. I don't know where the movie is in production at this point. Because again, this movie has been mired with different production setbacks and so forth, and directors leaving and so forth over the past, I want to say even goes back as farther than 5 years, probably somewhere around 10 years, that we've kept hearing they're going to reboot, different people being attached to it. But this movie is extremely fun movie, a darker movie, but you have Brandon Lee, Ernie Hudson. Good movie, very much a movie of the time. Very it's a rock soundtrack, or heavy rock soundtrack, but it's a fun movie, and again, it holds up extremely well. It's crazy. I've had this movie in so many iterations. I remember the first DVD player I ever bought one of the first DVDs I bought, first two DVDs. I think one was The Crow, the other one was The Matrix. Well, no, was it The Matrix? Was it The Matrix at that point? But I know one of the first DVDs I ever bought was the actual Crow. Next movie at number 38 for me is Ant-Man. Again, Marvel movies are definitely going to be on this list. This movie really caught me off guard. When I went to I didn't have a lot of expectations going into the movie because, we knew Edgar Wright was attached to it for so long. Then we had, Peyton Reed come on to direct the movie. So I didn't know, is it going to stay true to all the stuff we heard for so many years with with Edgar Wright. Paul Rudd, I've always liked. I didn't know, was he going to do Scott Lang? Was he going to do Hank Pym? Were they going to do I can't remember the other Ant-Man that Kirkman wrote. I felt like Rudd would have worked better as that Ant-Man that Robert Kirkman created, and I thought that would be kind of a cool take to do. When they decided that it was going to be Scott Lang, I was kind of disappointed because I was like, with his comedic style and, the personality he normally displays, he kind of would fit more if they did the irredeemable Ant-Man kind of arc. But they went with Scott Lang. But he kind of felt like an amalgamation between the irredeemable Ant-Man and Scott Lang at the same time. So it eventually worked. But in seeing the movie, I liked that it was a heist movie. I liked how they incorporated Hank Pym in the movie in S.H.I.E.L.D. It was a really solid story. And again, even I didn't have a problem with Yellow Jacket. Corey Stoll as the villain of the movie worked, but they didn't just give him enough time to flesh him out totally. But all the different elements of the movie kind of came together for me and was just a solid movie. Not a top 10 Marvel movie, for me, but it's definitely a movie that I go back to and I always enjoy going back watching it every now and again. Just fun. And sometimes you want to pop on a fun movie that's just going to make you laugh and you get all that action. And this is my go-to one of my go-to Marvel movies for just fun, a good fun time that I know the movie's going to make me laugh is with Ant-Man. Now, number 37 for me is Doctor Strange. This came out in 2016. Benedict Cumberbatch playing Doctor Strange. This movie is a solid movie. I like this movie. I don't necessarily love it. It's solid. I like the way they interpreted the character for the big screen. It was funny because way back when Marvel was doing the animated direct to home video movies, they did a Doctor Strange movie that they really, to me, they pulled a lot of influences from that animated movie, how they made Doctor Strange work in a film type format and converted it. A lot of those ideals, I don't know if they even pulled that or it just was a coincidence that the two were very similar. But if you go back and watch that Doctor Strange animated movie, it came out probably maybe 10 years before this movie hit. It was one of the first animated movies that Marvel did. And if you go back and you watch it, you'll see how very similar it is and how the action is portrayed, and with the spells, it is very, very similar, eerily similar. Not saying they bit off of it, but it definitely had an influence, I believe. But what do I know? I don't work at Marvel Films. But again, it's a solid movie, great lead. Interested to see him more, especially with Infinity War coming up. I like the little cameo he did in Thor Ragnarok. So I'm really looking forward to see Benedict do more with the character, and hopefully we'll find out this summer if and when we'll get that Doctor Strange sequel to come out. Next for me at number 36 is Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1 that came out back in 2014. This is a movie that I love the characters. I didn't love the story surrounding the characters in this movie. It's bits that I love to go back and watch that are just fun. but it's more so about the characters. And Guardians of the Galaxy kind of suffers from a problem I see with certain comic book movies. Another movie that comes to mind is the Suicide Squad. Love the characters, didn't care for the story of the movie, so the movie kind of falls a little bit flat for me overall. Some people swear by this. This is some people's favorite MCU movie. For me, not so much. I tend to like the sequel more than what other people do. People have reverence for this movie. I like it. I don't love it, but it was worth being on this list because it's a movie I've gone back and I've watched numerous times. But certain parts for me, like with Ronan, are cringeworthy to me. But then there's other parts that are just so fun, like the opening sequence with Star-Lord dancing on the planet and going to, get when he gets the Infinity Stone, that I really dig. It's a lot of fun parts to it, but then there's other parts that I don't care for as much. But it hits number 36 for me. Next, I have Thor Ragnarok. This just came out last year, 2017. It hits 35 for me. This is just a fun movie. I recently got this movie on home video, and I had a chance to rewatch it. I hadn't watched it since I went to the theaters to see it, so it was the first time me rewatching the movie, and it's just as funny. This is like with Ant-Man, this group with Ant-Man, where I want a fun action adventure flick that's just gonna make me just laugh. I'm always gonna pull this movie. It's gonna be my go-to movie with Ant-Man, like for that. So again, it's by far, I'll have to say, the strongest of the Thor movies. And I hope, and I've talked about this before, like I really hope that they do another Thor movie at some point. Taika Waititi really took the franchise and got it on track. We've had 3 films, 3 directors, 3 slightly different visions in each movie, and I think they finally found a vision that worked. And I finally allowed Thor to shine more as the lead, and he's not outdone by Loki. I feel like all the other movies leaned heavily on Loki, and he got more shine than Thor in actual movies. And Taika put the focus back on the lead character where it needs to be, and to let him shine as the star of his film. Even though this was very much an ensemble piece, because we got Hulk, and then we have Loki, we have Valkyrie, we have so many different characters. But with that, it still was very much Thor's movie, and you knew that in watching it. So I feel like they finally got the franchise after 3 films. They finally got the franchise on track. So I hope they continue with this going forward. Only time will tell, but I really enjoy this movie. This is, one of those Sunday fun day movies, where a date night movie. Then I just want to pop in, have some popcorn, sit on the couch with my wife, and just sit back and enjoy. That's always would be one of my go-to movies for that. Next film at number 34 for me is The Incredible Hulk. It came out back in 2008. This is, to me, probably the most underrated of the MCU Marvel Studio films. I love Mark Ruffalo as Bruce Banner and the Hulk. But it really started here because we had that horrible Ang Lee Hulk movie, that is not tied to this. But I like in this movie that they incorporated that origin. You just see it at the very beginning that it was another movie somewhere in the atmosphere, and they kind of just took all that and incorporated it in. And so they wouldn't have to retell the origin story and just hit the ground running, because we knew it was something that happened previously, and you picked it up from there. Now, Ed Norton, I really liked as Bruce Banner. I loved Betty. Who played her? What's her name? I'm going totally blank. Don't you hate when you go blank? I know somebody's yelling right now. Liv Tyler. That's who it was. Liv Tyler. I don't know why I couldn't remember that right then. But Liv Tyler, I was wonderful. I really enjoyed her as Betty Ross. I would love to see her character come back at some point. I really enjoyed her, and she was everything I felt like that. I mean, they nailed it with Pepper, I think, for the most part. That she was smart, she was strong-willed, she was equal to her love interest, and she was a little bit bossy, a little sassy too. So I really dug her in that role. We've seen her dad pop back up as recently as Captain America: Civil War. So I would like to maybe see what effect that might have on Bruce at some point. Who knows if she'll ever come back? This is kind of like the dirty secret in the MCU. We've heard that Abomination is at the Raft, but we've never seen Abomination ever again. They left the lingering plot line with the leader, that the leader, that the doctor, we saw the chemicals, seep onto his head, Samuel Stearns. So we did, they left so many things on the table for, in relation to Hulk that we've never gone back to. We've only just seen Thunderbolt Ross. We've only seen him pop back up, and that's really, it. We've seen William Hurt come back as Thunderbolt Ross, but nothing else really from that movie at all. And it would be interesting for some of those parts pop up maybe in Avengers, Infinity War, or maybe the fourth Avengers movie. This would be cool to give it a nod that movie does exist, because pretty much all aspects of this movie have kind of been swept away. Like, it happened, but it didn't really happen, type deal. So it would be cool to reference some of those plot lines that were left dangling there. Next for me at number 33 would be the first Sam Raimi Spider-Man that came out back in 2002. It's just a solid movie. You had a great cast with Tobey Maguire, Kirsten Dunst. You also have William Dafoe, James Franco. As always, the biggest downside to this whole movie, I felt like they wasted William Dafoe as Green Goblin, because that costume was just horrible. That's the one thing I felt like they just missed the boat totally on in this movie. But it's still a great Spider-Man movie. I mean, this franchise has been very resilient. It's been 3 different iterations of Spider-Man at this point. And I feel like they all were good to a certain extent, but I feel like they've really hit the mark and the pulse for right now what Spider-Man really needs to be with Tom Holland. But this is still a good movie. It's a solid trilogy. You can say what you want about Spider-Man 3, but Spider-Man 1 and Spider-Man 2 are solid movies in themselves, and it was some okay things about Spider-Man 3, but we go back to, we know that it was a lot of studio interference in that realm that kind of caused a lot of problems in the production of that movie. We've heard stories about it at this point, but it's one of those things. It is what it is, but it holds up well. But it's not a perfect movie, but it's a good movie, and we owe it for so much more that came after it. Like this, X-Men really kicked things up to a whole nother level for comic book movies, and we wouldn't have all the great stuff we have now if it wasn't for X-Men, wasn't for Spider-Man, the 2002 Spider-Man. Next on my list at number 32 is the first Thor movie, came out back in 2011. Here's the thing about the Thor movie. It wasn't my favorite movie for the longest time. Over the years, it has grown on me, and I've watched it over and over, and I think it is a solid movie. Even though this is lower or higher on the list than what Thor Ragnarok is. It's only a few spots. I think the great thing about Thor, where I can go back to and watch so many times, is that it's a great origin story for the Thor character. Seeing him on Earth, seeing him, get adjusted. It's a solid movie, and I have that certain affection for seeing him finding his way as a hero. And one of the scenes that I love more than any in that movie that just gets me every time is when he sneaks in and he's going to try to get the hammer from the S.H.I.E.L.D. Facility, and it's raining, and he goes and tries to grab Mjolnir, and he's tugging and he's pulling, and he's trying to figure out what's going on, and he realizes that he's just not worthy yet, and he just like breaks down. Like, Chris Hemsworth is such a good actor and I feel like he doesn't get the credit a lot of times for it, but you saw the makings of a good actor in the very first movie. I just always felt like not even the direction, but the script at times let him down because he didn't necessarily know what they wanted to do with the character. And I always felt like Thor was kind of handled better in the non-Thor movies, at least for the first and the second movie, till now we got Thor Ragnarok. But I just still love that him becoming a man, where he's getting out of his own way. He's learning how to be humble and learning how to be noble in a sense. And I just love that story that's being told and how it's acted out. And so the movie grew on me over the years. I think when I originally reviewed the movie, I gave it like a 6.5 or a 7, but I think it's a slightly stronger movie now. And it's just like, it's one of those movies that every so often I just have to go back and watch that original Thor movie. It just does something to me. It's just, like I said, it's a solid movie. It's not going to blow your socks off. Is Thor Ragnarok probably a better movie than Thor? Yeah, but it's really, when I'm talking about this list, is what my favorite, movie. So every now and then I like to just go back and revisit this movie and all the cool stuff that kind of came from it. And for this, to close out this second part of my greatest / favorite comic book movies of all time, will be Superman 2. This came out in 1980, and this is number 31 on the list. This, for me, is my favorite of the Christopher Reeves Superman movies. I really just enjoyed this movie, and for me, it was crazy because as a kid, I'm dating myself. Like I said, I'm an 80s kid. So in the early to mid 80s, cable TV was really starting and blossoming up all over the place. So, my mom was always a big thing about, she wanted us to have plenty to watch. We were like latchkey kids, so we would be home in the afternoons by ourselves because she had to work. She was a single, parent trying to raise 2 kids, me and my older sister. And so we would always have cable. And we would stay sometimes at my aunt's. My aunt stayed like 2 blocks away. So sometimes we stayed there. Sometimes, just depending on how soon my mom was going to be home from work, sometimes we just went straight home. I was living in Connecticut at the time. And like, the funny thing about cable back then, it was very limited. It might have been like 50, I don't even know if it was 50 stations tops. And it was so funny. You had this little keyboard type device that had push down buttons, and you had a little switcher thing on the side because you only could have so many cable stations on a row, and you had like 2 stations per button, and you had to flick like the top and the bottom. It was so primitive. I wish I could just like draw it and show it to you guys. It's just so primitive. But if you probably do like a Google search for like old time cable boxes, or you could see they were brown. They were so primitive, and they had literally like push buttons. It was so sad. So it was very limited. And like the big movie channels were, I think it was just HBO and Showtime in the beginning. I think it was just HBO was there from the very beginning, and I think in the movie channel. I think those were the 3 like movie channels like in the early 80s when cable was like, rolling out. Like, it wasn't like a thing that was like off to the side, like where it really started catching mainstream. Everyone could pretty much get it in the home. And the thing about it was that was so funny. Back then, you didn't get like hundreds of movies per month on cable. You got like 10 movies. And so you got 10 movies, every day, like when I came home, like from school, like that was the slot that Superman 1 and Superman 2 would come into. So literally I would watch these movies every day. And it was just like, as much as I love Christopher Reeve as Superman, I've talked about this previously, this first Superman movie never resonated as much. I loved General Zod in the second movie, and his I can't remember what their names were, but those 3 characters, they were just so cool. And Terrence Stamp, which just always made me love him as an actor after seeing him even years later. Like, I love seeing Terrence Stamp in like anything. I love the movie I want to say it was a Soderbergh movie, The Limey. I just love Terrence Stamp. Like, anytime I can see him in anything, I watch it just because it's him. And he's just a cool dude to me. And, like, Kneel before Zod, I just freaking ate it up as a kid. Like, I eat it up now. Like, anytime I see it, I just eat it up. I can't lie. I cannot lie. Terrence Stamp, Kneel before Zod, awesome. So I just love this movie, and I watched it so many times as a kid. Like, I can't even count how many times I've seen this movie, and it always just works for me, across the board. The whole story of, Clark giving up his powers to want to be with Lois, and then, Zod comes up, and he takes the trek in the snow, and he's all beaten up and bruised, and he has to get his powers back and fight the whole fight in the Fortress of Solitude. And I mean, it's just such a good movie, and to me it still holds up even from the lenses of a 42-year adult. Like, every time I watch that movie, it takes me back to me being a real young kid and just being at home watching it on cable, or even when it came on, because even back then too, like when you would see movies come on regular TV, I mean, we didn't have all the options. Back then it was NBC, ABC, CBS. Those are the three stations that you had. And like when the holidays or special occasions, they would run, certain movies. So you would have the TV edited cut. So you would even see, like, when Christmas would come around, or like Easter, like you would see the James Bond movies, and you would see like movies like the, Superman movies. And I just always would watch it wherever I could watch it. It just always resonated with me, and just is so good. So it's campy, but it still just holds up overall, and I still just absolutely love those movies to this day. I don't think I have it in my collection now. I need to get that, because pretty much most of these movies on this list I own and have in my home video collection, but I don't have Superman 2. And I know it's on iTunes, because pretty much now everything I have is digital. I need to pick that up. Note to self, need to pick up Superman 2. But that is part 2 of this countdown of my favorite comic book movies of all time. I keep putting these out. I'm going to try to put out at least one episode a month to kind of space them out in between me covering, different other comic book stuff as well. You guys kind of, from what I'm seeing just from the numbers and everything, you guys responded well to the first episode. So I'm glad you kind of are liking it. I hope if you're a younger listener, or you don't, you're not super versed in comics, and you're using this as a learning experience, I hope I encourage you to check out some of these movies if you haven't seen them before, because I know we have comic book fans of all ages and genres and from different backgrounds. So if you're not familiar, I'm hoping I inspire you to check some of these movies out. They're some of my favorite. Some people don't feel quite the same about them. The order is just based on my personal preference. It's nothing else to it. It's just how I feel at this point, and it probably will change. And at some point after I do this countdown, down the road, I will definitely update it and revamp it as more movies come out. But it's just something I thought that was cool to do, and do a countdown and give you some of the reasonings why I like these movies that I like. But everyone has personal preference. But I hope, like I said, if you aren't aware of some of these movies, or you haven't seen them, that it piques your curiosity to go out and check them out, and then let me know. Don't be afraid to give me feedback. You have multiple ways to contact me. Like I said, if it's through Twitter, through Instagram, the Facebook page. A lot of you guys have been hitting me up, like on Facebook, and tell me, hey, I've been enjoying the episodes. Can you cover this? I'm always down. I want this to be a community, so don't feel like you can't reach out to me and say, hey, I would love if you cover this, or if you talk more about that. I'm always open to suggestions on what you guys want to hear from me. So don't feel like you can't reach out. Again, you can follow me on Twitter, Instagram at Comic Book Savant. The Facebook page is facebook.com/Comic Book Savant. Don't forget the YouTube channel, youtube.com/Comic Book Savant. Got different content going on over there, also related to comics. So definitely check that out. Don't forget to stop by the website, www.comicbooksavant.com. You can find everything I'm talking about, all the links to social media, all the episodes, the audio and video episodes. You can also play directly off the homepage or off the website. Also, if you want to help support the show and you want to become a Patreon, check out patreon.com/Comic Book Savant. That's patreon.com/Comic Book Savant. Go over to that site, check out what it means to become a patron. If you want to help support the show, do that. And if you can't support the show financially, don't worry about it. There's other ways you can as well. You can do things like subscribe to the YouTube channel if you haven't done it already. Comment on when I share the links for new episodes and so forth on Facebook. Stop by the Facebook page, share it, leave comments, leave feedback, send me an email, leave feedback. Share the episode, share the links. When I tweet that stuff out, reshare those links, retweet them. A lot of you guys do, and I appreciate you so much. If you haven't, you listen, you haven't done that, just one of those things helps support the show so much. iTunes, it's been a while since I've gotten any iTunes reviews, and so if you listen to the podcast and you haven't done an iTunes review, take a moment, just take a minute or two out of your day and write a quick review on the show if you haven't already. All those things help support me and what I'm doing, and it helps the show grow and gain views and climb up on the charts on iTunes and things like that to help get more eyes on the show. So any of those things you do to help support, I greatly appreciate it. That's all I have for you guys for this week. I'll see you again next week with another episode of Comic Book Savant. You guys have a good week and take care. See you soon.